Have you finally come to save your apes?
I came for you.
For me? My God. Look at your eyes. Almost human. How did you know I was here?
I was told you were coming. That more soldiers from the north would be joining you here.
Joining me?
To finish us off. For good.
And that's a clip from War for the Planet of the Apes. Delighted to say we're joined again on the show by Andy Serkis, who is reprising his role as Cesar. Hello, Andy. How are you?
Hello, Simon. How are you? Nice to see you.
It's really nice to see you again.
You too.
I feel as though you've been part of the furniture of this show for a long time.
Well, I have.
And we've followed you and kind of been your cheerleaders. In fact, we're part of your success. In fact, we're largely responsible.
I always credit you for that. Exactly. You and Mark. I don't know where I'd be without you.
For your success. All right. Well, so here we are. So you're Cesar again. Just get us up to speed. Tell us where we are with this and where Cesar is for this story.
So at the end of Dawn, the last film, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, we saw a schism happen in the ape community between Cobra, an ape that had been brutalised and couldn't find a way of liking human beings, whereas Cesar, brought up with humans and brought up with love, is very empathetic towards the human beings. But that takes them to the brink of war. Their fallout takes them to the brink of war. And in this film, it picks up 3 years later, where the war has raged, and the virus not only has taken its toll on human beings, but war has too. Both sides are hanging on for survival, and it's got very, very desperate. Cesar, at the beginning of the movie, the apes are hemmed in Muir Woods in Northern California, and they are clinging on for dear life. We see them under siege, and then Cesar tries to make one last peace deal, broker for peace, where he says, "Look, let us have our territory, and you keep yours, and this war can stop. It's ridiculous. We've got to stop this." This is completely rejected, and actually what happens, the inciting incident of the movie really is there's an attack, and Cesar suffers unimaginable personal loss, which drives him over the edge, and we see for the first time in the character this lack of his empathy ebb away, his hatred for humans grow, and he's pitched into this mission of revenge, fueled by grief and hatred. It is the war for Cesar's soul, this movie. And it's an amazing turn for the character, because he has always been the one to try and find a peaceful solution to conflict. And so to actually go off on this, he actually stops becoming their leader at the beginning of the movie and goes off in this rather self-obsessed solo mission to hunt down the person who is responsible for the deaths that have affected him so deeply, without giving too much away.
Yes, and can we talk about the person who he's chasing?
Yes.
So we can.
We can.
Because obviously you don't want to spoil it for anybody.
No, exactly.
But, Woody Harrelson is nasty. He's a nasty piece of work, and he's the guy that you're after.
Exactly. So Cesar goes off to hunt down the Colonel, which is the character that Woody plays. The Colonel there are various factions of surviving human beings, and he has formed his own sort of army, if you like, a battalion of survivors who are military, who live under his creed, which is almost cult-like. And he rules with an iron rod, and he is quite brutal. But when Cesar does finally track him down, this is part of the way that Matt Reeves has constructed these movies.
Who's the director?
Yeah, Matt Reeves, the director. He doesn't see the world in black and white terms, and these films don't. So that it's not so much that the apes are good and the humans are bad, or vice versa. It's very much from the point of view that war is horrific, and conflict. Conflict. In conflict there are no winners. There are only survivors and people who suffer. So the Colonel, even though he wants to ensure the survival of humanity and will do it within any means necessary, you still see an element of humanity in him, or Cesar sees that in the Colonel, and they have this strange fascination with each other. You know, Cesar is fueled with hatred for him, but at the same time, there is a connection, a bizarre, as I say, fascination between them. The scenes between them are incredibly intense.
And one of the scenes, the Colonel says to Cesar, you know, stop being so emotional.
That's right.
This is the human being talking to the ape, saying stop being so emotional.
Exactly. I mean, that's the wonderful sort of amazing journey that I've had to play is seeing Cesar evolve from a chimpanzee into, in this movie, we see him almost human-like in the way he carries himself, the way he is physically, the way he speaks. I mean, in this movie, Cesar speaks much, much more like a human. In the last movie, you saw that evolution of speech using sign language and ape vocalizations, and then and also you know, the beginnings of proto sort of human language. But in this, you know, he has evolved, and again, it's a great tension that actually what Cesar is feeling. His emotions are so animalistic and full of, you know, brutal kind of primal animal feelings, but actually he has become more evolved.
One of the most touching relationships, ape relationships that Cesar has is with Maurice, the orangutan, who, and most of that is through sign language. Just explain about how what their relationship is, because he's kind of the mentor.
Exactly.
To Cesar.
He is. I mean, it's quite a Shakespearean relationship, really. It goes back to Rise, where Maurice the orangutan, you know, he has a certain wisdom and a sagaciousness about him, and has always been Caesar's conscience, if you like, and counsellor. And you know, he is a loyal follower of Cesar, and actually nudges him when particularly in this film, when he sees Cesar going off the rails and off track, and he tries to bring him back. I mean, several characters do that. Several characters act as Cesar's conscience during this sort of,
and he needs it,
journey.
And you do forget that a lot of what you're watching is, however you want to describe it, CGI, it's mocap, whatever. I'm not quite sure what, if I'd been on set with you, Andy, what I would have seen. But when I'm watching the movie, I completely believe that I'm watching hundreds of apes being held prisoner. I completely believe that I'm seeing what's the collective noun for apes, by the way? You know, I'm watching a troop of apes, yeah. All there. And I was wondering since you started this, what are the technological changes which have made your job either presumably better? What can you do now which you couldn't have done at the start?
Well, there are two things. There's sort of, in terms of shooting, all the things that we wear, the head-mounted cameras, the suits, the markers on the suits, and they send out infrared pulses to the cameras which are surrounding us. Then the cameras themselves, you know, when you think back to Rise, that was a very domestic film. It was set basically in someone's house, Will's house, James Franco's character's house. And then a facility, the ape facility, and then the laboratory. It really didn't go outside too much. So and then there was one sequence on San Francisco Bridge, and a section of that bridge was built, and they built the cameras. But then in Dawn, we took these cameras out into the wilds of the Canadian rainforests, and then we shot in. We replicated central San Francisco, but in New Orleans, and 100% humidity, and there was all that sort of stuff. Everything was becoming more robust and higher resolution in terms of the cameras that were trained on our faces for the facial capture. But in this one, we go a stage further in terms of the camera work and shooting in snow and rain and all manner of weather. But that's not the greatest technological advancement, really. If you look at the actual animation from Rise through Dawn to War, what you'll see in this is years and years of experience in animators being able to take the facial capture data from the actors, the performances that we've given, and by the software that's created for the rendering, so that the hair, the textures, the skin textures, the fur, the eyes, the way that the meniscus in the eyes, the way that the eyes well up, and so on. This is years and years and years. I mean, going back to Lord of the Rings, 17 years of being able to study, particularly my face, but others' faces who have been in this trilogy, and know them intimately and know what their facial expressions mean, and are able to honour the original performance, the acting performance that is given on the day with the director and the other actors. And that level of knowledge and skill and software is really the biggest technological advance.
So some listeners' questions to you, Andy. James Rodriguez question. I'm eagerly waiting for your vision of the Jungle Book. How has the success of Jon Favreau's adaptation affected your take on the material, if at all?
Well, the two films started off kind of, they were both in production at the same time, and there was a race at one time for which was going to come out first. They actually got ahead, and there was no point in bringing two films out close together. But we also wanted the time to carry on developing the facial capture side of what we were doing, because it's hard enough. I mean, if you take this film as an example, to take an actor's face and to see the fine detail of the actor's performance on an ape's face, which is very similar to a human's, if you imagine that process of applying that performance of Christian Bale to a panther, that requires another stage of understanding how to literally take the facial expressions that Christian gives in his performance, which are incredible, and to take that into the physiognomy of a creature such as a panther. Our story is very different to theirs. I thought Jon Favreau's film was amazing, and was wonderful and spectacular and had great performances, but our take was always an entirely different take. It was a much older, PG-13, more tonally similar to something like Apes, with a Mowgli-centric story, and crucially the differences we're using performance capture.
Here's a fascinating question from James Golding. How long do you think it will be before motion capture technology becomes affordable enough for schools or other education institutions to buy? Are we anywhere near that stage?
We are at it already. I mean, there are various film colleges, schools, universities that use performance capture, that have motion capture degrees, that are as part of animation degrees. It's proliferated. It is a very central part of filmmaking technology now, and it's standard industry. We at the Imaginarium, the company that I have with Jonathan Cavendish, over the last 5 years have had lots and lots of students come through from Portsmouth and Bournemouth and the National Film Television School to come and work with us, and so it's definitely here to stay.
There's a question which I know you're not going to be able to answer, but I just want to mention that there's some more Star Wars action coming up.
There is.
So, Andy, what can you tell us about the return of Supreme Leader Snoke?
Well, what can I tell you? I can tell you that nothing whatsoever. It's so boring. I mean, I'm so sorry.
It's part of the deal.
I tell you what, though, I have to say that Rian Johnson, the director, is a brill filmmaker, and he is just, he has created something pretty special.
And your directing debut,
yes.
Breathe.
Yes.
When do we get to see that?
Well, that is interesting, because, of course, Jungle Book was going to be my directing debut, but now this other film that we shot in the middle of everything else, which is a beautiful story, and it stars Andrew Garfield and Claire Foy, has become my directorial debut, and it opens this autumn, October the 13th in the States and October the 27th here in the UK. And it's the story, a true life story of Jonathan Cavendish's parents, my business partner's parents. Robin Cavendish, his father, when he was very young, in his 20s, was living out in Africa with his wife Diana. They'd just got married, had just fallen pregnant with Jonathan, and then he contracted a massive polio disability. He was given weeks to live. He had an emergency tracheostomy and was on a respirator, and fell into a Great Depression, was told that he had no reason to live. He basically said to his wife, "I want to die unless you get me out of hospital, because I can't live in hospital for the rest of my life, or even if it's only a month." So the story is about pioneering living with a major disability, living with a respirator. He's the first person pretty much to live outside of the hospital system, and lived for a number of years.
So very exciting, really, the fact this is going to be coming out. And
yeah,
and if you're going to try and decide which part of your life you're going to be concentrating on, whether it's going to be the motion capture, whether it's going to be acting, because when you mentioned polio, I was thinking back to your extraordinary performance as Ian Dury. Directing, what's going to be taking you next?
Look, if a great script comes up and a wonderful part turns up, then great. But directing is certainly, is become of great interest to me. It was always there, even back as far as Lord of the Rings, when I started to work with, with performance capture and visual effects and so on. I knew I was going to head towards directing. So that's, we're working on several projects at the Imaginarium, one of which is Animal Farm, which we're still evolving. There are various other projects, some of which are performance capture, some live action. So yeah, but that's where we're heading first.
Andy, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed. War for the Planet of the Apes, The Return of Caesar will be in your cinema. Andy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. Great to see you.